I just wanted to share this with you, and please let me know where you're from. I'm here in Idaho, in the United States of America. I've been here my whole life, so I'm not super exciting. But anyways, my priority too is to help people to realize that God is in charge. No matter what happens, He loves us. He's aware of us. He sees us, what we're doing, and He has a bigger plan in mind. I just wanted to share this with you, and I know there's a lot of things going on right now. It just keeps getting crazier and crazier, and there's wars happening. Right now, it is, for anybody seeing this in the future, it is March 27th of 2026. And there's war in Israel. There's war all over the place, with the United Nations getting involved in it as well. And so there's a lot of people who are unsure and don't know where to turn. And I know a lot of us, we just keep coming back to God. We keep coming back to Jesus Christ, knowing that He prepares a way to care for us and for us to have what we need. So anyways, with that in mind, we're just going to get going. Oh, thank you, Dust Wave. Good to see you, Jonathan and Pam. So awesome. Anyways, and of course, if you want to put in the chat where you're from, I know where you're from, but for everybody else, kind of help things get going. And last week we talked about the wars and how they would use wars to drive money and make it so that they could just they'd use the income taxes to pay for loans they had been taking, and they would kind of hide this money that they were getting through wars, saying that it was necessary so that people wouldn't question. So this one, establishing the establishment, one of the primary reasons the insiders worked behind the scenes to foment World War I was to create, in its aftermath, a world government. If you wish to establish national monopolies, you must control national governments. If you wish to establish international monopolies or cartels, you must control a world government. After the armistice in November 11th, 1918, Woodrow Wilson and his alter ego, Colonel House, the ever-present frontman for the insiders, went to Europe in hopes of establishing a world government in the form of the League of Nations. When the negotiations revealed one side and had been about as guilty as the other, the glitter of the moral crusade evaporated along with Wilson's vaunted 14 points. The rubes back on Main Street began to waken. Reaction and disillusionment set in. Americans certainly didn't want to get into a world government with double-dealing Europeans, whose specialty was secret treaty hidden behind secret treaty. The guest of honor, so to speak, stalked out of the banquet before the poisoned meal could be served. And without American inclusion, there could be no meaningful world government. Aroused public opinion made it obvious that the U.S. Senate dared not ratify a treaty saddling the country with such an internationalist commitment. In some manner, the American public had to be sold on the idea of internationalism and world government. Again, the key was Colonel House. House had set down his political ideas in his book called Philip Drew Administrator in 1912. In this book, House laid out a thinly fictionalized plan for conquest of America by establishing socialism as dreamed by Karl Marx. He described a conspiracy, the word is his, which succeeds in electing a U.S. president by means of deception. Regarding his real opinions and intentions. Among other things, House wrote that the conspiracy was to insinuate itself into the primaries in order that no candidate might be nominated whose views were not in accord with theirs. Hello, those that are on here, thank you for joining us, and please let me know where you're from. And if you've ever read the book None Dare Call It Conspiracy, which we are discussing tonight, with all the things that are going on in the world. And the interesting thing with this is not just America. This is, I would say, we saw a really good glimpse of this during the pandemic, when all of a sudden people, countries, governments that didn't get along and didn't agree on things, all of a sudden just kind of started to lockstep, and the same dialogues and themes were going on with everybody, and they had no problem controlling people in their views. So anyways, would love to know where you're from. Thanks for joining me. And I'm going to continue reading here a bit, and I'll stop about every page and read some comments and have some discussion about this. Okay, so this is establishing the establishment. All right. House had set down his political ideas in his book called Philip Drew, Administrator, in 1912. In this book, House laid out a thinly fictionalized plan for conquest of America by establishing socialism as dreamed by Karl Marx. He described a conspiracy, the word is his, which succeeds in electing a U.S. president by means of deception regarding his real opinions and intentions. Among other things, House wrote that the conspiracy was to insinuate itself into the primaries in order that no candidate might be nominated whose views were not in accord with theirs. Elections were to become mere charades conducted for the bedazzlement of the boobsy, they could call it. Okay, that's interesting. The idea was that to use both the Democrat and Republican parties as instruments to promote world government. And those of us that have listened to things from like the World Economic Forum, and as I mentioned before, things that happened in the pandemic, you can see how they've been trying to, and I would say the adversary, Satan, really is behind this, to get people to be controlled and to not be using their agency, which is our God-given rights to choose for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The reason why our founding fathers have created a pattern in which many other countries have copied. And hello, my friend Christian Zyberth. Good to see you. Listening while he's cleaning the church building. That's why he was not able to be on here tonight with me. Anyways, thank you for being here. But there's just been so many times where all of a sudden the rules change and they're able to do whatever they want. And we see through this book how these things have been brought about with them controlling money, but that creates power, and then it creates influence. And so it's been quite something to witness these things. And as we know, a lot of us have been very aware, and there's been some that have just been seemingly just completely blind to what's going on. And it's really hard to see those things happening. Anyways, we'll continue. So in 1919, House met in Paris with members of a British secret society called the Round Table in order to form an organization whose job it would be to propagandize the citizens of America, England, and Western Europe on the glories of world government. The big selling point, of course, was peace. The part about the insiders establishing a world dictatorship quite naturally was left out. The Round Table organization in England grew out of the lifelong dream of gold and diamond magnate Cecil Rhodes for a new world order. Rhodes' biographer, Sarah Millen, was a little more direct. As she put it, the government of the world was Rhodes' simple desire, Quigley notes. In the middle 1890s, Rhodes had a personal income of at least £1 million a year, then about $5 million, which he spent so freely for his mysterious purposes that he was usually overdrawn on his account. Cecil Rhodes' commitment to a conspiracy to establish world government was set down in a series of wills described by Frank Ideldolt in his book American Rhodes Scholarships. I can't say this name right. Ideldolt writes, the 7 wills which Cecil Rhodes made between the ages of 24 and 46. Rhodes died at age 48. Constitute a kind of spiritual autobiography. Best known as the first, the Secret Society will, and the last, which established the Rhodes Scholarships. In his first will, Rhodes states his aim, still more specifically, the extension of British rule throughout the world, the foundation of so great a power as to hereafter render wars impossible and promote the interests of humanity. Hello, Lord of the Things. The Confession of Faith enlarges upon these ideas. The model for this proposed secret society was the Society of Jesus. Interesting how they bring that up, though he mentions also the Masons. It should be noted that the originator of this type of secret society was Adam Weishaupt, the monster who founded the Order of Illuminati on May 1st, 1776, for the purpose of conspiracy to control the world. The role of Weishaupt's Illuminists in such horrors as the Reign of Terror is unquestioned, and the techniques of the Illuminati have long been recognized as models for communist methodology. Weishaupt also used the structure of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, as his model and rewrote his code in Masonic terms. Ideldolt continues. In 1888, Rhodes made his third will, leaving everything to Lord Rothschild, his financier in mining enterprises, with an accompanying letter enclosing the written matter discussed between us. This one surmises consisted of the first will and the confession of faith. Since in a postscript, Rhodes says, in considering questions suggested, take Constitution of the Jesuits if obtainable. Now, it's interesting to me because they talk about how they brush these things off as saying that they are going to bring about peace. But we know from the scriptures that there is only one who really brings peace, and that is the Prince of Peace, which is Jesus Christ. And so as I thought about that, I thought about what we have in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is the living Christ. And there's so much in there that helps people to know and understand the true nature of Christ. And I was going to read just a little bit of that for you here. Let me find it again. And it's Friday night for me. I hope everybody's having a good night. What plans do you have for the weekend? I know we've got archery shoots for our kids to go to, so we'll be busy with that. Let's see. Let me find this again here. Oh, that's got to be it. All right. So the living Christ. As we commemorate the birth of Jesus Christ 2 millennia ago, we offer our testimony of the reality of his matchless life and the infinite virtue of his great atoning sacrifice. None other has had so profound an influence upon all who have lived and will yet live upon the earth. He was the great Jehovah of the Old Testament and the Messiah of the New. Under the direction of his Father, he was the creator of the earth. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Though sinless, he was baptized to fulfill all righteousness. He went about doing good, yet was despised for it. His gospel was a message of peace and goodwill. He entreated all to follow his example. He walked the roads of Palestine, healing the sick, causing the blind to see, and raising the dead. He taught the truths of eternity, the reality of our premortal existence, the purpose of our life on earth, and the potential for the sons and daughters of God in life to come. Anyway, so, and that's the thing, is that's truly what this life is all about, is the plan that our Lord, that God has for us. And a lot of these things just become a distraction to us, and make us, as we spoke about before in other live streams, when we know that God will provide, it helps us to stay out of that survivor mentality that was so rampant during COVID, that people said, well, I just have to do this because I have to. And not a lot of good things follow those kinds of words. So let's see if I can get back to the right spot where I left off. Sorry. Oh, there we are. Okay. Apparently, for strategic reasons, Lord Rothschild was subsequently removed from the forefront of the scheme. Professor Quigley reveals that Lord Rosebery replaced his father-in-law, Lord Rothschild, in Rhodes' secret group and was made a trustee under Rhodes' next and last will. Sorry, and I forgot to say, of course, if you have any thoughts or experiences that you would like to share, I would love to read those. And times maybe when you know that your Heavenly Father was watching out for you and helped you to be able to have your needs met, when unexpected things happened that maybe you weren't sure how things would work out, but God just opened a window and had things work for you. Anything you would like to share would be awesome. So let's see. The secret, I think I read that part. I'll say it again. Okay, the secret society was organized on the conspiratorial pattern of circles within circles. Professor Quigley informs us that the central part of the secret society was established by March 1891 using Rhodes' money. The organization was run for Rothschild by Lord Alfred Milner, discussed in the last chapter as a key financier of the Bolshevik Revolution. The Round Table worked behind the scenes at the highest levels of British government, influencing foreign policy and England's involvement in conduct of World War I, according to Professor Quigley. At the end of the War of 1914, it became clear that the organization of this system, the Round Table Group, had to be greatly extended. Once again, the task was entrusted to Lionel Curtis, who established in England each dominion a front organization to the existing Round Table Group. This front organization, called the Royal Institute of International Affairs, had as its nucleus in each area the existing submerged Round Table Group. In New York, it was known as the Council on Foreign Relations. That's important to remember. Council on Foreign Relations. That's going to come up again and again. And was a front for J.P. Morgan and Company. And that's something that we hear about today in 2026. So it's a big, big business. Okay, let's see. J.P. Morgan and Company, in association with the very small American Round Table Group. The American organizers were dominated by the large number of Morgan experts who had gone to the Paris Peace Conference and there became close friends with a similar group of English experts, which had been recruited by the Milner Group. In fact, the original plans for the Royal Institute of International Affairs and the Council on Foreign Relations, we're going to call that CFR from now on. It will be referred to that in this book. Council of Foreign Relations is CFR. Were drawn up in Paris. Joseph Kraft, from CFR, however, tells us in Harper's of July 1958 that the chief agent in the formal funding of the Council on Foreign Relations was Colonel House, supported by such proteges as Walter Lippmann, John Foster Dulles, Alan Dulles, and Christian Herder. It was House who acted as host for the roundtable group, both English and American, at the key meeting on May 19th, 1919 in the Majestic Hotel, Paris, which committed the conspiracy to creation of the CFR, which is the Council of Foreign Relations. Okay. Hey, Christian. He says hi to Lord of the Stings. Okay. Let's see. Although Quigley stresses the importance of Morgan, men at the creation of the organization known as the Council on Foreign Relations, this organization's own materials and Colonel House's own memoirs reveal his function as midwife at the birth of the CFR. Kind of weird way to say that. So he's there from the very beginning of the Council of Foreign Relations, CFR. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts before about the Council of Foreign Relations. I know it's something that I've been familiar with, that name, but I just didn't think much of it. I imagine a lot of you probably didn't really think much about it either. But yeah, let me know what you think or have thought. The Institute of International Affairs, founded in Paris in 1919, was comprised at the outset of two branches, one in the United Kingdom and one in the US. Later, the plan was changed to create an ostensible autonomy because it seemed unwise to set up a single institute with branches. It had to be made to appear that the CFR in America and the RIIA, which is the RIIA where is that? It stands for I don't see it. Oh, okay. In Britain, were really independent bodies, lest the American public became aware of CFR was in fact a subsidiary of the Round Table Group and react in patriotic fury. According to Quigley, the most important financial dynasties in America following World War I were, in addition to Morgan, the Rockefeller family, Kuhn, Loeb and Company, Dillon Reed and Company, and Brown Bros. Harriman all were represented in the CFR, and Paul Warburg was one of the incorporators. The insider crowd, which created the Federal Reserve System, many of whom also bankrolled the Bolshevik Revolution, were all in the original membership. In addition to Paul Warburg, founders of the CFR included international financial insiders Jacob Schiff, Averell Harriman, Frank Vanderlip, Nelson Aldrich, Bernard Baruch, J.P. Morgan, and John D. Rockefeller. These men did not create the CFR because they had nothing better to do with their time and money. They created it as a tool to further their ambitions. The CFR has become to be known as the establishment, the invisible government, and the Rockefeller Foreign Office. This semi-secret organization unquestionably has become the most influential group in America. One of the extremely infrequent articles to appear in the national press concerning this council was published in the Christian Science Monitor of September 1st, 1961. It began this way. On the west side of fashionable Park Avenue at 68th Street in New York City sit two handsome buildings across the way from each other. One is the Soviet embassy to the United Nations, directly opposite on the southwest corner of the Council on Foreign Relations, probably one of the most influential semi-public organizations in the field of foreign policy. Although the formal membership in the CFR is composed of close to 1,500 of the most elite names in the worlds of government, labor, business, finance, communications, the foundations, and the academy, and despite the fact that it has staffed almost every key position of every administration since those of FDR, it is what FDR is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of our presidents. It is doubtful that one American than 1,000 so much as recognizes the council's name, or that 1 in 10,000 can relate anything at all about its structure or purpose. Gotta get a drink real quick here. Indicative of the CFR's power to maintain its anonymity is the fact that, despite its having been operative at the highest levels for nearly 50 years and having from the beginning counted among its members the foremost lions of the establishment communications media, we discovered, after poring over volumes of the Reader's Guide to periodical literature covering several decades, that only one magazine article on the CFR has ever appeared in a major national journal, and that in Harper's hardly a mass circulation periodical. So Harper's, that's the magazine, and that in Harper's hardly a mass circulation periodical. Okay, similarly, only a handful of articles on the council have appeared in the nation's great newspapers. Such an anonymity at that level can hardly be a matter of mere chance. What makes this secret organization so influential? No one who knows for a certainty will say the Christian Science Monitor, which is edited by a member of the American Round Table, a branch of Milner's secret society, did note in the article of September 1st, 1961, that its roster contains names distinguished in the field of diplomacy, government, business, finance, science, labor, journalism, law, and education. What united so wide-ranging and disparate a membership is a passionate concern for the direction of American foreign policy. The Christian Science Monitor indicates the fantastic power the CFR has had during the last 6 administrations. Because of the council's single-minded dedication to studying and deliberating American foreign policy, there is a constant flow of its members from private to public service. Almost half of the council members have been invited to assume official government positions or to act as consultants at one time or another. So as you see, a lot of that, so it says almost half the council members have ended up in official government positions. So there's nothing suspicious there, right? Just keep going along. But they are setting up these systems to have different people be in power who were not elected officials. The policies promoted by the CFR in the fields of defense and here, international relations become with a regularity which defies the laws of chance. The official policies of the United States government, as liberal columnist Joseph Kraft himself, a member of the CFR, noted of the council in the Harper's article. It has been the seat of some basic government decisions, has set the context for many more, and has repeatedly served as a recruiting ground for ranking officials. Kraft incidentally aptly titled his article on the CFR, School for Statesmen, an admission that the members of the council are drilled with a line of strategy to be carried out in Washington. As World War II approached, the Round Table Group was influential in seeing that Hitler was not stopped in Austria, the Rhineland, or Sudetenland, okay, and thereby was largely responsible. And thereby was largely responsible for precipitating the Holocaust. The Second World War would greatly enhance the opportunity for establishment of world government. The financing for Adolf Hitler's rise to power was handled through the Warburg-controlled Mendelssohn Bank of Amsterdam and later by J. Henry Schroeder Bank with branches in Frankfurt, London, and New York. Chief legal counsel to the J. Henry Schroeder Bank was a firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, whose senior partners included John Foster and Allen Dulles. With the Round Table doing its work in Europe, the CFR carried the ball in the United States. The Council's first task was to infiltrate and develop effective control of the U.S. State Department to make certain that after World War II, there would be no slip-ups, as there had been following World War I. The story of the CFR takeover of the Department of State is contained in State Department publication 2349. Report to the President on the results of the San Francisco Conference. It is the report of Secretary of State Edward R. Stettinius to President Truman. On page 20, we find, with the outbreak of war in Europe, it was clear that the United States would be confronted after the war with new and exceptional problems. Accordingly, a committee on post-war problems was set up before the end of 1939, 2 years before the U.S. entered the war. At the suggestion of the CFR, the committee consisted of high officials of the Department of State, all but one of whom were CFR members. It was assisted by a research staff provided by, financed by, and directed by the CFR, which in February 1941 was organized into a division of special research and went off the CFR payroll and onto that of the State Department. After Pearl Harbor, the research facilities were rapidly expanded and the Departmental Committee on Post-War Problems was reorganized into an advisory committee on post-war foreign policies, completely staffed by the CFR. This is the group which designed the United Nations. Which the interesting thing about the United Nations too currently is I know that when President Trump got into office, one of the things that he wanted to leave was the United Nations, I believe, where it was either that or something else where we were spending out a lot of money. I think it might have been something that was a green deal. But I know the United States, we were putting in a lot of money and we were trying to live up to the expectations, and other countries just kind of kept getting this free pass where we paid for all these things. So that's been a system of concern, the United Nations, I know. The first major successful step on the road to a world superstate, at least 47 CFR members were among the American delegates to the founding of the United Nations in San Francisco in 1945. Members of the CFR group included Harold Stassen, John J. McCloy, Owen Lattimore, called by the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee, a conscious articulate instrument of the Soviet conspiracy. Alger Hiss, communist spy, Philip Jessup, Harry Dexter White, communist agent, Nelson Rockefeller, John Foster Dulles, John Carter Vincent, he's a security risk, and Dean Acheson, just to make sure that Communist Party members understood the importance of the UN establishment. Political Affairs, the party's official theoretical journal, in the April 1945 issue gave the order. Great power, great popular support, and enthusiasm for the United Nations policies should be built up, well organized, and fully articulate. But it is also necessary to do more than that. The opposition must be rendered so impotent that it will be unable to gather any significant support in the Senate against the United Nations Charter and the treaties which will follow. One wonders if the members of the party level ever questioned why they were to support an organization dominated by the hated Wall Street personalities. Sorry. The landscape painters of the mass media have outdone themselves painting the UN as a peace organization instead of a front for the international bankers. Not only did members of the Council on Foreign Relations dominate the establishment of the UN, but CFR members were at the elbow of the American president at Tehran, Potsdam, and Yalta, where hundreds of millions of human beings were delivered into the hands of Joseph Stalin, vastly extending the power of the International Communist Conspiracy administrative assistant to FDR. During this time was a key member of the CFR named Lachlan Curry, subsequently identified by J. Edgar Hoover as a Soviet agent. So completely was the CFR dominated the State Department over the past 38 years that every Secretary of State except Cordell Hull, James Burns, and William Rogers has been a member of the CFR. So nothing suspicious here. Just keep going along. Nothing to see, right? While Rogers is not a member, Professor Henry Kissinger, Mr. Nixon's chief foreign policy advisor, came to the job from the staff of the CFR. And that's, again, the Council of Foreign Relations. Sorry. Let's see. And the undersecretaries of state, almost to a man, are CFR members. Today, the CFR remains active in working toward its final goal of a government over this entire world. A government which the insiders and their allies will control. The goal of the CFR is simply to abolish the United States with its constitutional guarantees of liberty, which we talked about that earlier. The country for which all others to pattern themselves after, the United States of America. And they don't even try to hide it. Published by the CFR on November 25th, 1959, openly advocating building a new international order which must be responsive to world aspirations for peace and for social and economic change. An international order, code word for world government. So remember that international order is the code word for world government, including states labeling themselves as socialist communists. The reason is evident to those who have studied its membership for this little-known semi-secret organization to be called the establishment. International banking organizations that currently have men in the CFR, including Kuhn, Loeb and Company, Lazard, Freres, directly affiliated with Rothschilds. All right, let me get back to it here. Okay. Dillon Reed, Lehman Bros, Goldman Sachs, Chase Manhattan Bank, Morgan Garrity Bank, Brown Bros Harriman, First National City Bank, Chemical Bank and Trust, and Manufacturers Hanover Trust Bank. Among the major corporations that have men in the CFR are Standard Oil, IBM, Xerox, Eastman, Kodak, Pan American, Firestone, U.S. Steel, General Electric, and American Telephone and Telegraph Company. Also in the CFR are men from such openly leftist organizations as the Fabian Socialist Americans for Democratic Action, the Avowedly Socialist League for Industrial Democracy, formerly the Intercollegiate Socialist Society, a United World Federalists, which openly advocates world government with the communists, such devotedly socialist labor leaders as the late Walter Reuther, David Dubinsky, and J. Lovestone have also been members of the CFR. In theory, these men and organizations are supposed to be the blood enemies of the banks and businesses listed above. Yet they all belong to the same lodge. You can see why that fact is not advertised. The CFR is totally interlocked with the major foundations and so-called think tanks. Included in the interlock are the Rockefeller, Ford, and Carnegie Foundations, and the Rand Corporation, Hudson Institute Fund for the Republic, and Brookings Institute. Think tanks is what it says. The fact that the CFR operates in near complete anonymity can hardly be accidental. Among the communications corporations represented in the CFR are national broadcasting corporations. And as I was reading those names, I was reminded as a child of watching the public broadcasting station, PBS station, with a bunch of children's shows, and I recognize a lot of those names from when I was a child. Okay. I don't know if any of the rest of you recognize those names as well. Or any other companies that have been attached to some things in very curious ways. Among the communications corporations represented in the CFR are National Broadcasting Corporation, Columbia Broadcasting System, Time, Life, Fortune, Look, Newsweek, New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, New York Post, Denver Post, Louisville Courier Journal, Minneapolis Tribune, the Night Papers, McGraw-Hill, Simon and Schuster, Harper Bros., Random House, Little Brown and Company, Macmillan Company, Viking Press, Saturday Review, Business Week, and Book of the Month Club. Surely the CFR could get a few blurbs of publicity if publicity were desired. If it seems impossible that one entity could control such a vast array of firms, it is because most people do not know that the so-called founders of such giants as the New York Times and NBC were chosen, financed, and directed by Morgan, Schiff, and their allies. The cast of Adolph Oakes of the Times and David Sarnoff of RCA are examples of this control. Both were given early financial aid by Kuhn, Loeb and Company, and Morgan. And that's the sad thing when you think about how hard so many people have worked trying to start their own business to be successful. And then you have these monopoly situations where you have things set up for them to be successful for the rest of their life. And, often, of course, when you have these companies with a unfair advantage, it would, as you would say, disenfranchise others with those opportunities for success when they corner the market, as they say. These are the establishment's official landscape painters whose jobs it is to make sure the public does not discover the CFR and its role in creating a world socialist dictatorship. You will recall the Colonial House believed we should have two political parties but only a single ideology, one world socialism. This is exactly what we have in this country today. Although there are philosophical differences between the grassroots Democrats and the grassroots Republicans, yet as you move up the party ladders, these differences become less and less distinguishable until finally the ladders disappear behind the establishment's managed news curtain and come together at the apex under the control of the CFR in 1968, when George Wallace maintained that there wasn't a dime's worth of difference between the two parties. He may not have known how right he was or why. So on this chart, it has a list of people who are Democrats and who are Republicans, and who's in control of these parties. I guess I'll just read them real quick. So the Democrats, it has listed Dean Acheson, Alger Hiss, that's a name I recognize hearing, Adil Stevenson, John Kennedy, and Edward Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, I recognize those, Avril Harriman, George Ball, Henry Fowler, Dean Rusk, Adam Yarmolinsky, John K. Galbraith, Arthur Schlesinger Jr., Hubert Humphrey, and John Lindsay. Republicans, it has listed Dwight Eisenhower, John Foster Dulles, Thomas E. Dewey, Jacob Javits, Paul Hoffman, Robert McNamara, John Gardner, Henry Cabot Lodge, the Rockefellers, Elliot Richardson, Arthur Burns, Henry Kissinger, and Richard Nixon. The following are so-called Democrats who have been or now are CFR agents: Dean Acheson, Alger Hiss, Adlai Stevenson, John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Edward Kennedy, Avril Harriman, George Ball, Henry Fowler, Dean Rusk, Adam Yarmolinsky, Hubert Humphrey, and John Lindsay. It is interesting to note that rewards of cushy jobs were given by the international bankers to many men high in the LBJ administration for their services. Under Secretary of State George Ball went with Lehman Brothers. Secretary of the Treasury Henry Fowler was taken in by Goldman Sachs and Company. Budget Director Peter Lewis. Okay, just lost my spot. Budget Director Peter Lewis. Where is it? Well, I can't find my spot, but all right, I'm just gonna. Under Secretary of State George Ball went with Lehman Brothers. Secretary of the Treasury Henry Fowler was taken by the Goldman Sachs and Company. Budget Director Peter Lewis. Under Secretary of the Treasury Frederick Deming, and former Secretary of Commerce C.R. Smith. All avoided the bread lines by being picked up by Lazard Frères. Let's see. Okay. In parentheses, it says Rothschilds. Fowler and Deming were largely responsible for policies which led to European nations claiming half of our gold and that's the United States, claiming half our gold and having potential claims on the rest, as well as denuding the U.S. Treasury of all of the silver reserves it had built up over a century of time. Did the international bankers take pity on these men for their incompetence, or were they rewarded for a job well done? Controlling the Republican Party for the CFR have been Dwight D. Eisenhower, John Foster Dulles, Thomas E. Dewey, Jacob Javits, Robert McNamara, Henry Cabot Lodge, Paul Hoffman, John Gardner, the Rockefeller clan, Elliot Richardson, Arthur Burns, Henry Kissinger, and Richard Nixon. Of course, I'd heard of Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon. While it is true that every administration since FDR has been dominated by the CFR, the Nixon administration has set the all-time record by appointing over 110 CFR members to key positions. Henry Kissinger, the Colonel House of the Nixon administration, came to his job directly from employment on the CFR staff. Kissinger represents the very opposite of everything Nixon said he stood for in his campaign. Both liberals and conservatives admit Kissinger is by far the most important man in the Nixon administration. Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to read it. It says, Boston Committee. Let's see. Richard Nixon now claims that he no longer belongs to the CFR, having dropped out when the organization became an issue in his primary campaign. For the governorship of California in 1962, Nixon has never said why he dropped out, but the fact that he has appointed over 110 CFR members to the important positions in his administration speaks for itself. It should come as no surprise that the very same Richard Nixon who campaigned in 1968 as a conservative had already made his real position very clear to the insiders of the CFR by authoring an article in the CFR magazine, Foreign Affairs, in October 1967. The title of the members of the Council on Foreign Relations article, Asia After Vietnam, revealed how the aspiring President Nixon would open a new policy toward Red China and bring realism to our Asian foreign policy. The CFR's annual report for 1952 admitted that sometimes members in sensitive positions were forced to go underground and keep the membership secret. Nothing suspicious there, just continue on. And I know there's been some discussion just today lately about Charlie Kirk and President Trump and investigations that were not allowed into what was going on with the death of Charlie Kirk and also with the attempted assassination of Charlie Kirk and the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. So those things, of course, still remain to be seen, and I'm just counting on when Christ returns and no knowledge will be withheld myself. So let me know in the comment section down below if you're looking forward to when Christ returns and no knowledge is withheld as well. Administrations, both Democrat and Republican, come and go, but the CFR lingers on. This is why the more things seem to change, the more they remain the same. The fix is in at the top, where the same coterie of insiders bent on control of the world runs the show. As Professor Quigley admits, there does exist and has existed for a generation an international network which operates to some extent in the way the radical right believes the Communists act. In fact, this network, which we may identify as the Round Table Group, has no aversion to cooperating with the communists or any other groups, and frequently does so. Yes, the insiders have no aversion to working with the communists, whose ostensible goal is to destroy them, while the insiders are serving champagne and caviar to their guests in their summer mansions at Newport or entertaining other members of the social elite aboard their yachts. Their agents are out enslaving and murdering people, and you are next on their list. How nice. Clearly, the Chicago Tribune's editorial of December 9th, 1950 on the CFR still applies. The members of Council on Foreign Relations are persons of much more than average influence in their community. They have used the prestige that their wealth, their social position, and their education have given them to lead their country toward bankruptcy and military debacle. They should look at their hands. There is blood on them, the dried blood of the last war and the fresh blood of the present one, the Korean War. And I would also love to have any comments you have about wars and how you felt, things that you've experienced about them. Anything you have to share of I know there was a time in a debate between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney that was really interesting. And it seemed very out of place that, and I have some definite disagreements with Mitt Romney at this point. But at the time, during this debate, while he was running for president of the United States of America, he said, and I'm going to make China play fair or something like that. And it was very interesting because there had been responses and reactions by the interviewers at that point for different things. But when he mentioned that about China, it was just silence. It's like they pretended that he hadn't said anything. And I felt that I was like, there must be something here for them to have responded that way because it just didn't quite fit with how they had handled everything else. So, anyways, all right. Clearly, the Chicago Tribune's editorial of December 9th, 1950 on the CFR still applies. The members of Council on Foreign Relations are persons of much more than average influence in their community. They have used the prestige that their wealth, their social position, and their education have given them to lead their country toward bankruptcy and military debacle. They should look at their hands. There is blood on them, the dried blood of the last war and the fresh blood of the present one, the Korean War. Sorry, I just read that. It goes without saying that the CFR's hands are bloodier now with the gore of 50,000 Americans in Vietnam. Shamefully, the Council has succeeded in promoting as American policy the shipment of American aid and trade to the East European arsenal of the Viet Cong for the killing of our sons in the field. It should not be surprising to learn that there is, on the international level, an organizational equivalent of the CFR. This group calls itself the Bilderbergers. If scarcely one American in 1,000 has any familiarity with the CFR, it is doubtful that one in 5,000 has any knowledge of the Bilderbergers. Again, this is not accidental. The strange name of this group is taken from the site of the first meeting in May 1954. The Hotel de Bilderberg in Oosterbeek, Holland. The man who created the Bilderbergers is His Royal Highness Prince Bernard of the Netherlands. The prince is an important figure in Royal Dutch petroleum, shell oil, and the Société Générale de Belgique, a huge conglomerate cartel with worldwide holdings. Well, it's interesting we use the word cartel because we're hearing that a lot in 2026, 2025. And I believe, as I mentioned, I had a friend in Mexico, one of my coworkers, and I wanted to understand why her husband wasn't here with her and why she had just moved here herself. And she had been born here in the United States and been here for a lot of years now. And she must have met him and went back to Mexico with him. She was Hispanic. She was from Mexico. Anyways, but she said that one day their truck got stolen. Hers and her husband's truck got stolen. And they found themselves laying there in the gutter with bullets flying over their heads because the cartels were fighting with each other. And her husband was just like, you got to get out of here. Like, I'll get out when I can, but you got to get out of here. And she, legally came back. But it's so sad that people are having to leave their home countries and leaving their family or friends because of the terrible things going on where they live. Anyways, let's see. All right. Prince Bernard makes no effort to hide the fact that the ultimate goal of the Bilderbergers is a world government. In the meantime, while the New World Order is being built, the Bilderbergers coordinate the efforts of the European and American power elites. Prince Bernard's counterpart among the American Bilderbergers is David Rockefeller. chairman of the board of the CFR, whose economic base is the giant Chase Manhattan Bank and Standard Oil. Among the other Bilderbergers from the world of ultra-high finance are Baron Edmund de Rothschild of the House of Rothschild, C. Douglas Dillon, CFR, Dillon Reed and Company, Robert McNamara of the World Bank, Sir Eric Roll of S.G. Warburg and Company, Ltd., Pierce Paul Schwartzer of the International Monetary Fund, and George Ball of Lehman Brothers. Not everyone who attends one of the Bilderbergers' secret meetings is an insider, but only men of the left are allowed to attend the private meetings following the general sessions. The avowedly socialist parties of Europe are well represented. Another example of this tie-in between the insiders of high finance and the ostensible leaders of the proletariat. Bilderberg policy is not planned by those who attend the conferences, but by the elite steering committee of insiders composed of 24 European and 15 Americans. 24 Europeans and 15 Americans. Past and present Americans of the Bilderberger steering committee include George W. Ball, Gardner Cowles, John H. Ferguson, H.J. Heinz, I've heard of that before. The second, Robert D. Murphy, David Rockefeller, heard of him, of course, Shepard Stone, James D. Zillerbach, and Mello G. Collado, Arthur H. Dean, Gabriel Hughes, C.D. Jackson, George Nebelstein, Dean Rusk, and General Walter Bedell Smith. Those who adhere to the accidental theory of history will claim that this is sheer coincidence that every single one of those named as past and present members of the Bilderberg Steering Committee is or was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So as you see how they stack these positions and stack their money and influence and power. The Bilderberger Advisory Committee forms an even more inner circle than the steering committee. Americans on the advisory committee include Joseph E. Johnson, Dean Rusk, Arthur H. Dean, George Nebelstein, John S. Coleman, General Walter Bedell Smith, and Henry J. Heinz II. Again, all are members of the CFR. One would assume that is, if one had not read this book, that when the world's leading parliamentarians and international tycoons meet to discuss the planning of their various nations' foreign policies, that the news hawks from papers and television land would be screaming to high heaven that such an event held in secret makes a mockery of the democratic process. One might expect Walter Cronkite to be thundering in wrath about an elite clique meeting to plan our lives, or the New York Times editorialists to be pounding their smoking typewriters, fuming about the public's right to know. But of course, the landscape painters merely brushed the Bilderbergers right out of existence and focused the public's attention on something like the conditions in the prisons. This is interesting to hear here. Or Coke bottles littering the highways. Since the Bilderbergers are a group of the left, or as the liberals in the media might say, but don't, a group of progressives, they are allowed to go on in peace and quiet planning for 1984. The fact that there is heavy Rockefeller, Chase Manhattan Bank, or CFR influence in the media might also have something to do with the fact that while everybody has heard of, say, the John Birch Society, and almost always in a derogatory manner from the Eastern establishment media, Particularly, nobody has heard of the Bilderbergers. As this is written, there have been 29 Bilderberger meetings to date. They usually last 3 days and are held in remote but plush quarters. The participants are housed in one location and are protected by a thorough security network. This decisions are reached, resolutions adopted, plans of action initiated, but only Bilderbergers ever know for sure what occurred. We must assume that these people did not congregate merely to discuss their golf scores. The press naturally is not allowed to be present, although occasionally a brief press conference is held at the end of the meeting, at which time the news media are given in very general terms the Bilderberger version of what was discussed. By all the secrecy, if there is really nothing to hide, why do the Ford, Rockefeller, and Carnegie foundations finance the meetings if they are not important? Yes, why? The most recent meeting took place at Laurent Rockefeller's Woodstock Inn at Woodstock, Vermont, April 23rd, 24th, 25th of 1971. Apparently the only newspaper to carry a substantial story on the meeting was the Rutland Vermont Herald, whose reporter could acquire only sketchy information about the meeting, what the meeting was all about. The April 20th, 1971 issue of the Herald reported. A rather tight lid of secrecy was being kept on the conference. A closed-door meeting was held in Woodstock last week to brief a handful of local officials on some phases of the conference. One participant of the meeting insisted Monday that the officials were told the meeting would be an international peace conference. Interesting, an international peace conference. However, other reliable sources said the conference will deal with international finance. It's interesting to hear the words of peace conference and compared to international finance. There's some descriptions here of these different political people. So Woodstock Inn will apparently be sealed up like Fort Knox. No press coverage will be allowed, with the exception of issuing a statement at the close of the meeting on Sunday, when Prince Bernhard arrived at Boston's Logan Airport. He did admit to reporters that the subject of the conference would be the change in the world's role of the United States. Let me read that again. I think I said it wrong. The subject of the conference would be the change in the world role of the United States. So how much influence and effect they would have, it sounds like. Isn't it nice to have changes in America's role in the world decided upon by Bernard, Rothschild, and Rockefeller? There's real democracy in action, as they say. Present at the scene to carry back orders to Mr. Nixon was CFR, Rockefeller Aaron Boy, the president's #1 advisor on foreign affairs. Henry Kissinger. Shortly after the Woodstock meeting, two ominous and role-changing events occurred. Henry Kissinger went to Peking and arranged for the acceptance of Red China as a member of the family of trading nations, and an international monetary crisis developed, after which the dollar was devalued. As a British statement, and Rothschild confidant Benjamin Disraeli wrote in Coningsby, "So you see, my dear Coningsby, that the world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes." It's really interesting to me as I've looked at, I've heard different political statements made. There was one time, it was Johnny Depp even, who's a famous celebrity. He was on this panel and I heard him, this recording of him saying some years ago. He said, we're just a part of the distraction. And so, distraction from what? From all the things they're doing, from all the money that they get, all the power that they get, and how we think to ourselves that we are voting people in to make decisions. And a lot of these decisions are being made by others that we certainly did not vote for. Anyways, so thanks for joining me. The next chapter is chapter 6, the Rockefellers and the Reds. So we'll have 3 more readings here from this book. Let me see if I can find really quick. I have written up an intro to what I just presented. Let me look at it really quick. This for the ending of the video for tonight. So, in a world filled with uncertainty, confusion, and increasing control over economies and systems, where do we turn for truth, peace, and lasting security? This is the description of this video, by the way. In today's message from Love Notes from God, we reflect on the powerful testimony of Jesus Christ, found in the living Christ, and consider how his divine role stands in contrast to the shifting powers and influences discussed in Chapter 5 of None Dare Call It Conspiracy. While the world may present systems of power, wealth, and influence that shape nations and affect our daily lives, we are reminded that above all earthly authority stands Jesus Christ, the light, the life, and the hope of the world. He is not only aware of the conditions of our time, but he is actively guiding his work and his children. As we examine the idea that unseen forces may influence governments, economies, and freedoms, we are invited to ask a deeper question: where is our trust anchored? The testimony of modern prophets declares that Jesus Christ is a living Son of God, the Savior of all mankind, and the ultimate source of truth and liberty. His gospel offers something no worldly system can provide: true peace, eternal perspective, and freedom from fear. To better know and understand Christ, we must also see the workings of the adversary and how he creates fear in the hearts of men. And this is something that I have really wanted to focus on, how people have been so controlled by fear, by the father of all lies, the adversary, Satan. This is not just about conspiracy, but understanding that there must be opposition in all things. As you watch, consider how strengthening your relationship with the Savior can help you navigate a complex world with faith, courage, and discernment. God is not absent in times of confusion. He is present, guiding, warning, and inviting us to come unto him. He lives, and because he lives, we can face the future with hope. So, we all need a reminder of where peace is found, of who is truly at the helm, who is in charge. And I know that as I look through my video list on the algorithm, my YouTube algorithm, the things that it pushes out to me, there's so many different stories of war and fear right now and famine, and it's hard to know what things are true. Thankfully, we have prophets that have told us that if we did not have the guiding and comforting, constant companion of the Spirit, the Holy Ghost, that we would be deceived. So thankfully, we have the opportunity through having the gift of the Holy Ghost to be able to know what things are true and what things are not. It's getting harder and harder to tell these days. Anyways, thank you for joining me tonight. Please remember that God loves you, and I do too. And we are all children of God, and he is watching after us, and he knows our names. Please share this with anybody that could use some encouragement. I know there's been several people that have told me that this is a book that they have planned on reading but never read. So it's nice to have it read to you and a little bit of conversation too. And hopefully I will see you next week, in the next couple of weeks. And have a happy Palm Sunday this week, and have a happy Easter next Sunday. And of course, I will be speaking with you just before then as well. Thanks, everyone, and have a good night. Bye. Love Notes from God.